Hi, welcome to another episode of the Leadership Enigma. Now, without a doubt, there is a theme running through a number of the episodes that we're having the privilege to run, and that is about the force for good. How do we individually, how do we collectively, how do we organizationally become a force for good? And this was certainly a theme in last week's episode. We talked to the amazing Andrea Crosta from Earth League International. So we've got another amazing guest. No pressure, Camilla. But we've got Camilla Byk MBE, who actually founded Podium.me. And, well, I want Camilla to tell you her story because it, again, is a wonderful example of how we can be a force for good, how one person can start to make a difference. I'm looking forward to this already. Come back to me just after this.
You're listening to The Leadership Enigma, powered by Transform Performance International, a podcast for the insatiably curious to explore the power of human-centered leadership to create real momentum for positive and sustainable change. Whether you're an entrepreneur, business owner, or corporate executive, each week we speak to global experts, academics, rising stars, ambitious upstarts, and disruptors as we discover that success leaves clues. Now, here's your host, Adam Pacifico.
Well, there we do. I still chuckle at that intro, but Camilla, it's a massive warm welcome to the Leadership Enigma.
Thank you very much.
It is great to have you on. And I hope I've teed that up correctly in relation to really this being under that banner. I think that incredible banner of being a force for good. Before we get into the work that you are doing and the work that you're really known for now, I want you to tell the listeners a little bit about you and about your background, because I always find that people's stories, in many ways, the success has left clues in relation to who you are and what you do and why you do it. So I'm going to pause and hand over to you.
Wow. Well, I think one's upbringing is always really key to who one is. And I don't know why I'm saying one. That must be the MBE talking.
Well, you've been with royalty, so
I've had a lot of teasing. People taking their hats off in the street and silliness. So yes, so I'll drop that right now. So upbringing, I think the way that you are treated as a young person can influence the way that you turn out. And I was always given a can-do attitude. My mum would say, you could do that, you could do that. It became her catchphrase. If we drew a little picture age 4 and she'd stick it on the fridge and go, you could be an artist. And my sister, lo and behold, became an artist. I started recording people on my little, radio player from the age of about 6. I was interviewing my school friends, and my dad said, you could do that. You could be Kate Adie. And I'm not Kate Adie, but I do broadcasting and always have done in my own way. So everyone around me believed in me. And I think that is the secret of why I am who I am and why I want to enable other young people to be who they want to be.
Now, I think I'm right, aren't I? That mum was a nurse, is that correct? And
that's right.
Your dad was in the military.
Correct.
And so really that's incredible, isn't it? That you remember from an early age that can-do attitude. So it's right, isn't it? That we are in many ways a product of our environment. And we know, and I've had the privilege of working with some other charities and working with young adults who haven't maybe had that opportunity, but yet they are incredible human beings, and the resilience they have, they don't even know it, Camilla, is much more than any kind of exec that I might work with. So what really then fueled your passion to go on and use your broadcasting skills to start to really help young people? And when we talk about young people, I think we're talking about, was it the 14 to 15 to 25 age group? Am I right?
Yeah, that's right. Those key 10 years where you're sort of stepping away from the nest. You're working out that you no longer have to please your parents all the time. You no longer have to please your peer group all the time, but who are you? And I just realized that was an age group that was really underrepresented in the media and certainly wasn't listened to in a respectful way. So I thought, how can I, in my own way, with a little bit of tech, basically a mobile phone, do something about this?
Now, I'm curious as to when was that aha moment for you that age group, 15 to 25, was underrepresented? I've got 2 in that age group, aka teenagers, and oh my word, that's another episode altogether. So where was that aha moment for you that you wanted to or needed to work with that age group?
I'd been working for the BBC in educational television for a while, so programs for schools, and I could see the benefits of storytelling, the work of teaching young people how to be good citizens. I worked for various charities, making their sort of internal comms videos, and so I was familiar with that world, but it was all very formal and organized and commissioned and very adult centered, if I'm honest.
Right.
And I wanted to turn all of that on its head. And my aha moment came when just down the road in Clapham Junction, there were some riots in 2012 that made headlines. And those riots happened in various city centres around the UK. And I was curious. I've always been very curious. And I wanted to go and talk to the people who'd been affected. So the shopkeepers, the young people who were helping clean up outside the shops that I saw down there with their own dustpans and brushes, and the politicians who were hanging around getting their kind of moment of airtime. I wanted to be there. And I suppose that's my little Kate Adie moment. I thought, I'll make my dad proud. I'll go down and report on a live event, having never done that before. So I took my phone, and the shopkeepers didn't really want to talk, and the CNN kind of umbrellas were up, and Sky News, and they were doing all of that, talking to the adults, and no one was talking to the kids. And I thought, well, I'll go and chat to them then. And they didn't really want to talk to me because I was going to film them, because I come from a TV background. I thought, well, I'll make a little film. And this is not a stereotype at all, but they genuinely put their hoodies over their heads and said, don't show my face. And I said, but why not? You're helping clear up. And I said, tell you what, I bet this phone thing, it was a new iPhone, I didn't really know how to use it. I bet it does just audio recording, doesn't it? And they said, yeah, of course it does. It's called voice memos. Okay. I said, here's my phone. Can you find that for me? Show me how to do it. And then I started asking them questions, voice only. And that was the moment that I realized they had so much to say. They didn't care that I was in a different age bracket to them, that I had different experiences to them, that I spoke differently, that I wasn't wearing a hoodie. They wanted to tell me how they cared and loved their community, how they wanted to make it a better place. And I thought that to me is the story. And all these news crews around here, that's not the story they're recording. So it was that moment that I thought, audio, I'm going to teach them, but I'm actually going to get them to teach me.
I have so many questions already. So this is Clapham Junction, or the Clapham riot, 2012, so 10 years ago. And I want to understand some of the things that were aha moments to you. So what was the immediate response of that age group, that they couldn't believe that you wanted to hear from them?
That's exactly right. I've actually got it on tape. Why would anyone want to listen to us?
That's really sad in itself, isn't it?
Yeah.
And if we think about it, is that there's something quite systemic about that we've never actually gone to the young people, to the future, and actually said the present. You're right, the present, and actually said, what do you think? How do you feel? What can we do to help? What are you doing? How's this impacting on you? And so how quickly did the penny drop for you when you were on the streets recording?
Oh, instantly. I thought, this is gold dust. I thought, what I've got here is incredible. And how can I get more of it? So I contacted a local school and I said, can I come in and do a lunchtime club, like an audio club, I think I called it. And they said, yes, amazingly. And they said, what kind of kids do you want to talk to? I said, anyone who wants to talk. I don't want you selecting them. I don't want the best kids. I don't want the eloquent kids. I want the people who sign up themselves. And that became the kind of blueprint for how we work with young people. We have a no selection, no rejection policy. So anybody who comes to podium.me and wants to speak gets a place.
I love that. And I'm going to come back to that no selection aspect, because I think that's so relevant, maybe even to organizations as regards how they recruit and how they recruit the younger generation coming through. Let me ask you, what happened to all of that rich material then back in 2012 that you were gathering? What did it lead to? Where did it end?
Well, it hasn't ended yet. And we've been on an incredible journey. And we spin on a dime. I don't know where I got that expression from. Someone once said it to me. But it's the idea that we stop and start things. If something works, we have a go. If it stops working, we move. If a young person says, why haven't we got Snapchat at podium.me? I say, set it up. Why haven't we got this? You start it. So we want to know what is happening, and we tend to be ahead of the curve for that reason, because if you're listening to 15-year-olds, lo and behold, you do actually hear things before the adults get to hear about it.
That's
so,
right.
so we make a lot of decisions very, very quickly, and so it's led to audio dramas being written and created all over the UK. It's led to global podcasts being made where we've just said yes to partnerships with other organizations around the world. So many things. And the sky's the limit, really. People say, why don't you do video? Well, we haven't needed to yet. That may come in the future. I don't know.
Right. Okay. So it's all been audio up until now.
Yep.
Right. Okay. And that was, as you say, based on the fact that no one wanted to actually have their face on camera back in 2012. Did the content itself from 2012 lead to a product, or did that go out for consumption?
It did go out on YouTube, and but we're all about the production rather than the product. And again, that's slightly turning things on its head. For me, success isn't numbers. It isn't how many Instagram followers you have. Success is being authentic and taking people on a journey. And that journey will look different for everyone. So I'm looking at the producers. I'm looking at the people who want to create the content, the voices, the young production team, and how that is made rather than where it goes.
So it's very much the journey as opposed to the destination. Exactly. As you were going through this experience, Camilla, take into account the background that you've had, the privileges that you had, and the opportunities, and then this experience, what impact did it have on you? What change did it have on you?
Well, I've got kids as well, and 3 teenagers now, and it made me look at the way I parent. It made me look at, as you say, privilege. How do we share out opportunities? Yep. We have no right to select or reject anybody. How can we be curious about people who are different from ourselves? And at one point, the BBC did come to me and say, how come you've got such a diverse team? How did you do that? As if I had some magic formula or strategy. And I told them about the no selection, no rejection. I said, this is it, because if you do that, you will end up with a diverse team. It's not rocket science.
It's not, is it? And so let me ask you about now the creation of Podium.me, because that's the platform, isn't it, that you're operating with. Mm-hmm. Tell us a little bit about, how would you describe Podium.me now to the listeners?
I think it's a very, very non-hierarchical, broad structure where anyone can come along and do what they like, and we will enable them in a kind of bespoke kind of way to move. I use the analogy, of a sort of moving conveyor belt, like, Heathrow Airport. You get on and then you get off when you're ready.
Not a luggage one. Not a luggage one.
Not a luggage one.
They're not moving.
One. No. One where when you're getting to your gate, and it's the idea that we're like the belt. We're not trying to hold on to you. You don't have to stay with us.
Right.
But what's really special is I noticed on some of our training days, I'd hear people saying, oh, I've been part of the Podium family for a while. And I think, Podium family, who came up with that concept? But they'd come up with it. And I think it was because they knew they could dip in and out of it, just like a real family. They could do something at 16, maybe post GCSE, they might make a podcast with us, and then they'd disappear off and do their thing. And they'd reappear at 21 saying, I've just finished university, I've done a journalism degree. Can I do some more Podium.me stuff? And I go, yeah, what do you want to do? And do you want to come and help me lead some training for the next lot of 16-year-olds? And just like a real family, you kind of share with your siblings and you kind of do things together, but sometimes you're absent, sometimes you're more present. Podium.me is like that. We just kind of welcome them whenever they want to come back.
I mean, that's incredible, isn't it? And listen, you're a mum, and for now those young adults to be calling Podium.me a family, how does that make you feel?
So proud. You're going to make me cry.
Oh, I don't mean to, but it's amazing. I'm hearing that passion. Listen, you and I chatted very briefly about Gary Ridge from WD-40, where he talked about, he had that maniacal focus on culture where 98% or something said they love to work at WD-40. Well, let me talk to you about that. You've got young adults calling you family. Yeah. How does that feel?
It feels amazing. I mean, the very first training day we did was in my house, in my kitchen, and I invited Jane Garvey, slightly bravely, I didn't know her, to come and speak, and she came. And so I had Jane Garvey, host of Women's Hour at the time, sitting in my kitchen with me interviewing her, and I just thought, this is surreal. And I think we had about 16 students, quite a few international students who were studying in London, and that was a family event. I made sandwiches and we sat in the garden. I think I put a table tennis table out and they kind of played in the breaks, and they weren't my kids, and I didn't yet have children of that age, but there was a warmth around it. And she obviously commented on it. I think she's used to speaking to great big, stages and big BBC events. And this was different. This was something that was really intimate. And yet the fruit of those 16 that were there, what they've gone on to do is just phenomenal. I'm not going to give specific examples because I'd miss somebody out, but they were inspired by people taking time to welcome them, to teach them, to give them examples, to role model for them or whatever. But the other thing I did is I made sure that every single one of them had their turn on the platform as well, the platform of my kitchen chair, to talk about their experiences. So it's never one way. We're not the adults telling the young people how to think or what to do or sharing our great knowledge. We are exchanging information all the time. So each of them came up and pitched an idea or talked about their experience as well.
It's incredible, isn't it? Because I want the listeners to understand that actually how we were introduced is because I think some of your interns at podium.me reached out on your behalf. And then they created some notes, which I've got here as well. So in many ways, there's a lot of love in that room because they were reaching out proactively and very keen for you to share the message. So how does that make you feel? Because this was all happening in the background as they were chatting to me and raving about you and sending me emails with notes.
I think it encapsulates how I like to work. And I call myself a lazy leader because a bit like my gardening strategy, it's like, well, let's see what comes up. Let's throw out some seeds. Let's have a go at pruning that rose and see if it works. Oh, whoops, it didn't. I quite like dandelions, so I leave them there. And I think my leadership is kind of like that. It's a lazy leadership. So when they suggest something, I just say yes. It's much easier to say yes than no. And so they said, when they heard about the MBE, they said, it's so exciting. Can we write a press release? And I was like, oh, how do you do that? I don't know. And one of them did it. And then the other one said, well, can we send that out to some people? I said, okay. And, they just got on with it. And so we don't lead from the top down because that way you end up controlling an environment. And I don't want to control it. And I want to see what happens if people are just allowed to spring up where they land.
I love the fact that in the notes, I think it's, as someone put in here, that most of the young people didn't actually know what an MBE is.
No, why would they? That's the adult world.
I love it. Although they've now done a press release about it. So
they read up about it, as all good journalists do. They did their research and, they quoted verbatim what they found in Wikipedia and they sent it out to a bunch of people. And so and then I got an email from you. So I then had to look up the leadership enigma. I apologize, Adam, that I needed educating, but we're all lifelong learners. So that was a great thing.
And that's why I always say that I love this podcast, because I get to meet great people and I get to learn, and it doesn't really get better than that, does it? I want to come back to lazy leadership. Is it really lazy leadership? Because in many ways, you're very humble and you're very inspiring and you're empowering for these young people. And in many ways, you're giving them their personal power and the autonomy and the trust in order to have a go. I'm wondering if that actually isn't courageous leadership, because you're able to lead the organization, but also follow. I don't know. What do you think?
I'm definitely keen on being a follower and serving in that way. It's a much safer space to be in. If you put yourself on a pedestal, you're going to fall off.
Well, I would agree, or someone knocks you off. It's normally the press that do that, but is that another one? More and more episodes are coming out of this for sure.
So if you stay in the crowd, then you're safe. So I'd say, you say courageous leadership. I'd say it's quite timid, because I think to myself, well, if I stay in the crowd, A, I'll be connected. I'll know what's going on. I can hear what's happening. B, I'm not putting myself out there to say I've got all of the answers, because someone will knock me off. And C, we are stronger together, aren't we? So I'm sounding like, I don't know what I'm sounding like.
I agree with you. I mean,
it makes total sense to me.
And how many people are currently involved in podium.me?
Oh, you see, because of this whole coming and going classic teenage thing, which I love, I don't really keep tabs on them. I mean, there could be 50 at the moment, some are at uni and some are off traveling and some are studying, it varies all the time. I'm never quite sure.
It's like they're all your kids now.
They are.
They're all.
And amazingly, my very first colleague who came to us for her first job, straight out of university. She taught me everything I know about editing, and worked in my house, and, became part of my family, really. She's just had her first baby a couple of weeks ago, and I went round, and it was really special to see, one of my kind of proteges, and I wouldn't dare call her my protege. She taught me, I'm one of her proteges, moving on in her personal life as well as, everything else. And we stay connected, which is really important. And I think in any organization, being authentic, being real, and not trying to hide who you are makes an enormous difference in the way that people might respond to you. And going back for a second to upbringing, my grandfather was someone who brought us up to realize that it was rude to sit next to someone on a bus without having a conversation with them.
Love that.
And that became the basis of my TED talk, which was basically, be curious, talk to strangers. And if we all did it, we would change the world. It's a very simple message again, but all came from a grandfather who just said, always think of a question that you can ask the person sitting next to you, whether it's, that looks like an interesting book, would you recommend it? Or, I like your tie, where did you buy it? Or whatever it is.
And you mentioned the TED talk. When did that happen, and how can people find, I know they can look at TED, but what was the title of the talk?
I think it's You Already Know How to Change the World, What's Stopping You?
Okay, so people can check that out. And how did that come about, Camilla?
I was helping out at a Radio Academy festival event and being interviewed by Ed Miliband, of all people, for his Reasons to Be Cheerful podcast.
Right.
So I was there with one of our student journalists, and I can't remember the context, but one of the other students who was running the green room, she came rushing up to me afterwards and said, would you do a TED talk at my university? And feeling all kind of say yes to everything, I rather blasé said, yes, of course. And then realized, help, I'm not a public speaker. I can't do this. But I like to practice what I preach. And I'm always saying to podium.me people, if you're not out of your comfort zone, you're doing something wrong. So I thought, okay, I'm out of my comfort zone. So I'm following my own advice, and I've got to do this for them. And I really enjoyed the experience. It was terrifying, but I really enjoyed it.
Terrifying, but in a good way. I know that experience. I really do. Let me come back to this no selection, no rejection, because you're aiming for the 15 to 25 age group. Am I right that there are actually people older than that who are taking advantage of podium.me? So there's that inclusivity piece. Tell us a little bit more about this no selection, no rejection, because as you say, others have looked at you and said, how have you got such a diverse or diversity of thought? How have you managed that? So where did that come from?
When I was looking for a career, I wanted to work in radio, weirdly, and I got rejected from every graduate scheme. I think I tried the World Service. I think talk radio just started then. And it was pretty demoralizing because I had some good ideas. I was enthusiastic. I filled out the forms. I had some good grades. I couldn't understand why I wasn't getting these jobs. And I think a part of that stayed with me. And I thought, this is ridiculous. Why do you ask people to fill out forms and have, grades in order to measure their capabilities? What I actually want is people with attitude and aptitude. I thought those are the key things. You can't measure them. You can only measure them through experience. Yeah. So why don't I just try them all out and sort of see what happens? And what did happen, which to my surprise, was that someone contacts you and you get back to them and you have a 20-minute chat on the phone and you find out a little bit about them. And lo and behold, they tell you a lot of stuff because they want to talk about themselves. You then give them a task. Now, they either never contact you again, in which case they've deselected themselves. That's right. Fine. Go with my blessing. Or they rise to the challenge and they produce something really fantastic that surprises you. Or they do one thing and then they disappear. So what then happens is the best people stay with you and they rise to the top. And then when another organization like Reuters or someone says to me, we're recruiting, have you got any good people you can send our way? I can look easily at my sort of inbox and think, who are the people that have come to my attention because they've actually delivered? And then I can pass them on. So the conveyor belt works like that.
That's interesting. So are organizations now looking to you to select people, or in some ways to start offering potential candidates to them because they've been through this experience, through this process?
Yeah, because I can give really good reviews of people who have stepped up to the challenge. And then they can leapfrog that whole grades attainment thing, because that becomes irrelevant. If I can say this person has done an incredible job of running a training day or whatever they've done, then that organization knows that they are vouched for and they can be relied upon, and they'll do a great job.
So what advice would you have for, I work with so many large organizations, Fortune and FTSE companies, and many young people think, oh, that's so impressive. And many think, well, maybe I can never get there. What advice would you have to the leaders running those organizations, or the leaders who are responsible for considering how they attract and retain talent within them?
Well, there's all the usual things of being authentic. I'm just looking at some of my kind of thoughts I had before this, but following your instincts, realizing that someone doesn't need to be confident to be a leader. They need character. Looking at different measures, giving people a little bit of time to deliver. One of the things we did recently is an organization in Egypt contacted us and said,
right,
we do, news content, with young people, training young journalists and things, but we don't have any podcasting experience. Can you help us with that? And they said, how are we going to select the people that can go on this program? And I said, well, how about just let's take everybody and see what happens? They said, we can't do that. I said, don't worry, we'll be okay. So we did the information session and 120 people showed up. And they said, we can't make 120 podcasts. I said, don't worry, just wait, don't worry. So we did the information. And then lo and behold, we set a task and 30 people deliver the task. And then we set the next thing and 6 to come to the actual, let's make this. And we created 6 incredible podcasts in partnership. But if we had tried to block people at the beginning, we would never have found those 6. How would we have got them through to the end? So that's what I would say, is spend a little bit more time listening, investing in a task, and see what comes to you.
Now, do you think that in some way, is that akin to assessment centers that some organizations run, or is it not? I don't know. I'm just trying to work out in my own mind when they're giving people a task, but is it too formulaic, Camilla?
The task we asked was, write us an email with a sentence on why you'd like to join this program.
Right. Okay. And they end up self-selecting essentially.
Exactly.
Wow. And then so I suppose as you have multiple tasks, then you're just going to end up with the self-selection criteria.
You find the people that really want to do something. And if that approach had been used when I was trying to get a job out of university, I know I'd have got the job.
You'd have kept going. You'd have persevered and got through all those tasks.
Yeah.
I think it's fascinating that this whole aspect of kind of no selection, no rejection. I do wonder that people fear that, because they just think, how the response that you had was 120 people. How can we cater for that? We can't cope for that. We don't have the resources for that. But you stepped in and said, trust the process. And then 120, as you say, went to maybe 60 or 30 or 6, and it was ta-da, and away they go. So I wonder whether organizations can actually, grab hold of that and be brave enough to say, trust the process, and let's see if we get a really, breadth and depth of diversity, which they're looking for, and inclusivity, as opposed to selecting very quickly in sometimes quite arbitrary ways. I don't know. I'm jabbering on, but am I on the right track there, Camilla?
I really believe that it can make a difference. I'd be happy to sit down and talk to someone and try and experiment on different levels with different kinds of careers to see whether this works. But I believe in it. I've been doing it for 10 years and it really does work in my experience. And you asked whether we accept people who are older than 25. I'm not broadcasting that fact openly as podium.me, because we focus on the 15 to 25-year-olds. But I will take people who really want to benefit from, the information that we have, if they have the right ethos and want to get stuck in. Who am I to see age? I don't think that's relevant at all. So we have had one person who came to us from a career in working in the railways.
Right.
And she said, can I have a coffee with you? I've seen what you're doing. And I said, yes, of course. And she then came with me to cover a young event, actually with Jamal Edwards. And we were talking to young people about music, and she knew a lot about music. So she transcended age and had an interest in what they were doing. And as a result, she ended up making her own 2 series for Radio 4 and won a gold aria. So, she started at podium.me and then took it to where she wanted to take it. And I'm so proud of her.
I was going to ask actually, what are some of the products that are coming out the other end of Podium.me? Because they're learning all these skills, you're creating that family network, but what's coming out of the other end, apart from the experience and the culture? Yeah.
So things get picked up on. So one of our early interviewers was up in the north of England, and he contacted me and he said, there's a girl that's just arrived in my class from Syria. And this was when the Syrian conflict had just begun. And he said, I'd like to talk to her. Would that be okay? Can I do that for Podium? Of course, I said yes. And so he recorded this interview in his lunch break with a classmate and sent it to me. And I broadcast it that day. And then I got a call from World Service that afternoon saying, where did you get this from? And I said, oh, it's one of my young journalists, you know, he's just interviewed a classmate. Can we get you on the program tonight? And so he was on the program, I was on the program. The whole concept of just talking to the people around you, finding the stories that are there seemed to be revolutionary to them, seemed pretty obvious to me. And so we find that we get recognized for the work that we do. Other areas have been in the areas of mental health. We've done documentaries for Radio 1 on what it's like to live with borderline personality disorder. 2 young people with borderline BPD came to Podium, said, can we train as journalists with you? And by the way, we'd like to make a program about ourselves. I pitched the idea to Radio 1. They loved it. We made a documentary. So we are very reactive. You know, the ideas come. I've never commissioned anything. And when a good idea comes along that I think might fit the brief for the kind of people who do commission, I put it forward.
Wow, I mean, that's amazing. And when you talk about BPD as well, that is something that's kind of close to my heart and something we, from a family perspective, we've had experience with as well. So it is wonderful, the work you're doing. Podium.me, what's next? What's the next chapter for Podium.me?
Well, we celebrate our 10th birthday this year. We're going to have a party, and my interns did actually ask me that question. They put me on the spot. I wasn't expecting it. And they said, well, what about the future? And I thought, oh, I don't know. I said, well, you're it. Threw it back onto them. And we will go where we're needed. And that sounds a bit, no, that sounds a bit worthy. But it's true. We don't know what is needed. And the moment that podcasting becomes irrelevant, you know, you and I will hopefully down tools and find something else or another way to communicate different messages. So I think that's it. I mean, it might be holograms, who knows? But I think that there's always something around the corner. We just got to keep our ears open.
The metaverse 3.0. I say that as if I know what on earth that means, Camilla, and I don't. But if you ask some of the young people, they'll help both of us. What's next for you, Camilla?
For me, it's listening more, trying to completely put down imposter syndrome. I'm turning 50 next year. There we go. I've said it. And
trust me, it's okay.
It's okay.
Been there.
Oh,
it's okay.
Is it all right on the other side?
Welcome.
I don't see age, and I will continue to not see age. So that helps. And I think we can hold ourselves back. So for me, it's let's not hold ourselves back. And let's share what we've learned with other people. That's another reason why I was happy to do this, daunting though it was, because hopefully there's some nuggets in there that somebody will hear and think, do you know what, I can do that.
Yeah, this can't be daunting for you, Camilla. You're actually a trained broadcaster. I'm just someone who thought I needed to do something in lockdown and created a podcast. So I don't know who's more nervous. We'll have to work that out. How do people get in touch? How do people get in touch who might be young adults who are listening to this? We do amazing work with leadership through sport and business, and they are a social mobility charity. And some of the young adults that I've had the pleasure to work with there are extraordinary. And guess what? They don't realize it. And so how do people get in touch? And I hope maybe some big businesses might say, hey, this kind of no selection, no rejection, I want to know more about that. What's the best way?
I think email is probably the best, good old fashioned email, which isn't a youth communication of choice, but I have discovered camilla.byk@podium.me. And I'd be very happy to hear from anybody who wants to get in touch.
And social media wise, they can find you. There's a website, I know, LinkedIn, Facebook,
yes,
Twitter.
I'm on LinkedIn, Camilla Byk, BYK.
Okay.
I live the brand. I go everywhere on my bicycle. So yes.
Well, there we go. You've got that sorted. Here's my final question. With everything that you've experienced and the work that you're doing, what's the best piece of leadership advice that comes to mind for you that you've given or received?
A bad leader has lost touch. I heard that this morning. I did a little survey this morning.
Okay.
And a little story that really touched me was I asked someone why their leader was so good. And this was in a church context. And I said, why is Tiff such a great leader? And this woman said, well, firstly, she's phenomenal. And secondly, it's her Tiffiness. And I thought that sums it up, because it's who we are as leaders that really speaks to people, not what we say, what we do, it's who we are. So I promised Tiff that Tiffiness would make it potentially into the podcast, because we can all be your Adamness, my Camilla-ness. That's what it is that makes a difference.
Our uniqueness.
Yes.
Okay, there we have it then. I've never had a Tiffiness as that piece of leadership advice, which I think is great, by the way. And you're right, it's not what we say or what we do. It's almost certainly how we make people feel. So I think we're definitely aligned on that. Listen, Camilla, I could talk to you for ages, which would be desperately unfair, but thank you so much. Have you enjoyed our brief but wonderful conversation on the Leadership Enigma?
It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much, Adam.
You've been an absolute superstar. Thank you so much for joining us.
Join us again next week for more tips and strategies on the Leadership Enigma. We'd love to hear your comments on today's show, as well as suggestions for future topics and guests. Get in touch with your host on LinkedIn or visit the dedicated website, www.leadersenigma.com, powered by Transform Performance International, where you can access our exclusive learning, including books, videos, bonus content, assessments, and more. Please don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe on all your major podcast platforms. Thanks for listening.